Hi, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the concept of the women's sphere in the 19th century, something that was written about a lot at the time, and the associated idea of the cult of true womanhood or the cult of domesticity, something you probably haven't heard about, but this is going to introduce you to it. So, the idea of the woman's sphere, the sphere of woman. This picture is from Goody's Ladies Book, which is a publication. It's a women's magazine or little monthly publication from the 1820s to the 60s, I think it was. And this publication was like women's magazines today, whether it's Cosmo or Women's Day or Vogue or what have you, combination fashion, home advice, that sort of thing. Had a lot of interesting illustrations, and this isn't the only place this idea appeared, but this particular illustration illustrates it as well as anything. And if I had you here in class, I'd ask you to just talk about what women's sphere is based on this picture. Obviously, it's this domestic, home-based kind of thing, raising the children, taking care of the babies. You notice this very idealized middle class life, the brother and sister acting very different from the way I acted with my sister when we were kids, different from the way my children act. Look, we have a book here. They're kind of, the dog is being super attentive. Everything's nice and sweet. The baby's not crying. It's a perfect little domestic scene. But this is where women hold sway, and this is where women are masters. That's the idea of the sphere of women. Of course, what's unsaid here is that the sphere of men is a different sphere. The sphere of women is private, domestic. It's the home. It's the children. It's smaller. It's focused on the virtues of the family. The sphere of men is the public sphere. It's the sphere of business. It's the sphere of money, of building things, of politics, of action. And so this is really seen, of course, by men in particular, as this sort of natural division of roles that belongs to women and men, and therefore, of course, women should be happy and content to be abiding in that sphere. That's the idea of the women's sphere. So 1966, this is 100 years later, obviously. You remember we talked about Betty Friedan and how she in the Feminine Mystique went back and looked at magazines like women's magazines and advertisements of the 1950s and saw these images of housewives, of happy housewives that were being sold to women. And she used those kind of as the basis for her book. Well, that started a lot of people looking into sort of cultural products like this. And what Barbara Welter did in this article here is that she went back to the women's magazines of the 1800s. She was a historian, and she was looking at the images and the concepts of womanhood that were being sold to women in the 1800s, and she identified it as what she calls a cult, the cult of true womanhood. And as she says down here in this article, that this phrase, what she says, this phrase that's being frequently used then is this phrase womanhood or true womanhood. And what is true womanhood? She identified what she says are four cardinal virtues, four cardinal features of true womanhood. You see the picture here called Family Devotion. This is from 1870s. The father is reading from the Bible for the family. The children are very attentive, and the mother passively sitting there. They always seem to have a passive animal as well, a cat sitting there. And this is, again, the perfect house. But the four cardinal virtues of true womanhood are, first of all, purity. Women should be pure. This picture is from a cautionary tale. This woman is, of course, should not be listening to the attentions of this young man who, like all young men, has no good in mind. The idea was that women's role is to hold men off, to remain pure, chaste, virginal until they get married, because men are animalistic, and they can't really control themselves, so they need the tempering influence of a good woman who can be pure and keep him from outstepping his bounds. Same sort of thing in a different way. Piety, religiousness. Not just that she's Christian, but that she has a religious sensibility which communicates itself to the children, to the husband. So women are naturally more pious, they're more godly than men, and their role then is to bring sort of the wickedness of men into some kind of regulation. They teach the children to be religious and pious. Here you have a mother praying with her little son. Again, these images come from the magazines and things that went out to women. This one's from England. This is submissiveness. I identified it as submissiveness. Again, these are 4 different things: purity, piety, submissiveness, that Weller has identified as part of the cult of true womanhood. Women are seen as naturally being submissive to their husbands. You look at the way she's staring delightedly into her strong husband's face, where he looks off into the world. He's about to go to work. He's wearing mining clothes. He's got a little miner's hat, and he's holding a mattock. I don't think any miner really has that look on their face when they go off to work in the morning. But off he goes, and she is going to maintain the home and do what he says, and he's there to protect her, and she's there to be under his protection. That's kind of the natural order of things as was seen at the time. And again, finally, domesticity. So the purity, piety, submissiveness, and domesticity. These are the 4 cardinal virtues. We see image after image which show this. Domesticity meaning being at home this is a home sweet home picture. So being at home in the home and making a good home and being domestic, and you can see she's sewing things and making that thing on the wall is probably embroidered by her. She's sewing clothes and taking care of the children, and they have this sort of sweet domestic home that the husband can come home to from his work. So these kinds of things are being sort of sold to women or projected for women as the model for the way they should be. Unquestioningly, like this is the normal sort of natural way of things, and that it's ordained by God. It's the kind of thing Sojourner Truth was responding to, of course, when she says nobody helps me. Well, they said women have to be helped into carriages and doors open for them. These women you're seeing in these images might live like that, but Sojourner Truth is saying this isn't true of me. A phrase that's sometimes used to kind of sum up these things is the angel in the house. The angel in the house was a poem by Coventry Patmore, a now lesser known poet from the 1900s. This is like a whole long poem he wrote about his wife and how she's angelic and wonderful, and this image here by George Elgar Hicks is titled "Women's Mission: Companion to Manhood." So the woman's role is to be a companion to the man. You can see him, he's had some kind of news in his hand there. He's holding some kind of letter that's received terrible news. Maybe his work is going badly. He's been fired from his job. Who knows what it is, but the wife is standing by him. She's giving him moral support. And that's what a woman does, is she is the companion to manhood. That idea was very openly kind of put out there for women. They're angels, but angels in the house. They're not supposed to go out to be angels in the street or out, at work or anything. Now, at the same time, it's not true. And I have to make sure that I'm not saying that in the 19th century women lived like this. That it was always a myth. And you can see this is a 19th century factory. You can see all the these sort of wires and gurney and things here. This is the one giant steam engine would drive the whole thing, and then everything else was ingeniously connected by pulleys and straps and things. But they're all this is probably thread making or cloth making factory. You can see that, of course, the foreman is a man. but the workers are women. These women are not living a life of purity, piety, domesticity, and maybe submissiveness, but it's not true. Here's another picture of women from the 19th century. This is a peanut factory in Virginia. I haven't been able to figure out what year it's from. It looks to me like it's probably the late 19th century. These don't look like just from the styles and then they don't look like they're enslaved women. Their clothes are too nice for that. But so this is. But these women, obviously, again, are not living this mythical cult of true womanhood. They're working. Not all women worked, of course, and there were middle class women. But even in a domestic house, if you look at this picture of a kitchen, and there's another one. I don't know what the year of this is. This looks to me like the 1890s, but I'd have to judge by the stove. But this woman's working her butt off. It's a lot of work keeping up, especially a 19th century house. Even in medieval, it's still a lot of work to keep up a house. And so this idea of, you look at all these women before, and they don't seem like they're working as hard as this woman. Even for middle class or upper middle class women, I have to make myself a little smaller here so that you can see this. Even for women who were from a pretty good segment of society who had money, there was still a lot of work to be done. This is by Jean Boydston. I found from a website on the cult of domesticity, it's sometimes called. Although advocates of female domesticity, being house life, described households as if they took care of themselves, even in prosperous families. Wives cooked, cleaned, laundered, sewed, nursed sick family members, took care of their children, and performed a host of other labors. In 1864, author Lydia Marie Child, whose husband was a lawyer, so he had a good job making money, a prosperous family, used a diary entry to summarize her work for the whole year. In addition to writing 53 articles and correcting proofs for a new book, so she was a writer and a very active writer. The long list of work included cooked 360 dinners, cooked 362 breakfasts, swept and dusted sitting room and kitchen 350 times, filled lamps 362 times. So filling all the lamps with oil or kerosene is something that she would have had to do. She also took care of sick friends and family members, made 83 items of clothing and assorted linens, preserved 2 pecks of fruits, mended clothes, and accomplished other innumerable jobs too small to be mentioned. That's way more than I get done in a year. But again, this woman is not living, if I go back to these other pictures, she might be doing that, but she's not doing this. She's not having, look how passive the women are in all these pictures. The women are sitting, they're listening to their men, they're kind of keeping half an eye on the children. They're not working hard. But when you look at what actual women are doing, they're working very hard. And I think that's one of the kind of things you can point a finger at, and that's one of the things Sojourner Truth did. Is like, what are you even talking about? This image of women you have is not what women are. Men kind of knew this, I think. This is from 1900 or so, 1905 maybe, from the early 1900s, when this idea of the new woman was sort of exploding at the time. And these are comical. These are actually, each of these was two pictures. It was like a Viewmaster where you'd see 2 of them at once. And they're 2 different companies. They're both called the New Woman Wash Day. And they're sold as a comedic little thing for people to look at in their viewer. The one on the left, they're from different companies. The one on the left has the woman reading a magazine called Truth. She has, to me, I don't know if I can get closer in on these guys. I don't know. No, it's not going to go closer. But if you look, she's got a really disinterested look on her face, and the husband looks really mad. But he's doing woman's work now. He's working hard. In the one on the right, the woman is going to go off for a bicycle ride. She's smoking a cigarette. She's got her gloves on. I love this picture. She's all kind of dolled up. He's very subservient, bent over, wringing out the laundry. This showed what men at the time thought of as a role reversal, right? But the role that the men are in here is working their butts off. It's not some kind of domestic angel in the house kind of role that the men are taking on, and that's kind of, so even the men know that it's not really true. So in Attacking the Myth, we have a speech you're going to be reading this weekend, and you're going to be writing about it at the end of next week. And this is by we've made an AP prompt out of, as you can see, and we'll have this for you to work on. But this is by Lucy Stone, who is an important leader in the women's movement in the 1800s. She started one of the two main suffragist organizations. She wasn't at the first Seneca Falls women's rights conference, but she was at some of the other ones, and an important writer. One of the things about Lucy Stone, so here's what she actually looked like. One of the things about Lucy Stone that's interesting is that she kept her own name. Her husband's last name was Bradford. She kept her name as Stone, which was not a thing that women did in the 1900s, but she said, I have to have my own identity. So even from the beginning of her marriage, she had this idea of a woman as not being sort of subservient or a side product to the husband. She was the first woman in Massachusetts to go to college. She had to leave the state and go to Ohio to go to college. She talks about that in the speech you're going to read, and she's a very forceful speaker, and she's kind of she really sees the need to break down this idea of the woman's sphere, to break down this image of women, the cult of domesticity, the cult of true womanhood, whatever you want to call it, that had been given to women, and she wants women, in the speech we're going to read, to break out of that. So what is this speech? The speech is it's commonly known by one of the things she says in it: disappointment is the lot of women. It's at the National Women's Rights Convention at Cincinnati, Ohio, 1855. She's responding to a man who had said that women's rights movement was a few disappointed women, and by disappointed, that would be understood to mean unmarried. So these women who couldn't get a husband, now they're all upset, and so they want women's rights. And so she takes that word disappointment, she turns it around and says, yeah, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed by the whole way society that is giving me these roles that I don't really want, that they don't let me have a fulfilling life. The lot of women means the share of women, the fortune of women. It's the thing that women are born into, is disappointment. And I'm sick of being a disappointed woman. So she really uses that phrase well in the thing you can see here, the one she says, from the first years to which my memory stretches, I have been a disappointed woman. And she wants you to be disappointed too, until you stop putting up with it. That's kind of her message to her audience. That's my quick little introduction to the cult of true womanhood and to Lucy Stone. You're going to be reading this speech. You'll have a chance to comment on it. We'll talk about it next week before you have to write about it. But we want you to have in mind the sort of background that she's talking against of this image of womanhood being given to women for, at this point, most of the century in the 1800s, or actually no, this was 1850s. So for 30 years, really, this stuff had been kind of coming out again and again, and she's really trying to push back against it. Okay, that's it for me today, and thank you very much.